also in the Gita. Now, the picture which I showed you was about the Kathopanishad with the chariot, and eventually we can relate to that with Sri Krishna ji as the charioteer of Arjuna. Atmanam rathanam viddhi shariram rathamev tu buddhim tu sarathim viddhi manah pragahamev cha indriyani hayanahur vishayansteshu gocharan atmindriya manoyuktam bhoktetya hurmanishina. And this is leading us to referring to the body as the chariot, the soul as the owner of the chariot, and giving the instructions to the charioteer. The soul, being the owner, gives the instructions to the charioteer. Buddhi, intellect, the coachman, the driver, and the mind, either reins, equal to the reins, the indriya, the senses, the organs of perception and actions, the horses pulling the chariot, and pertaining to the organs of perception, the senses, the objects, taste, smell, sight, touch, and hearing are the path, constitute the path. So the soul uses the body, the indriya and antahkaran, and man is the sukshma indriya. We generally know about 10 parts, jnanendriya and parts karmendriya, the 5 senses of perception, jnanendriya, and the 5 organs of action, karmendriya. But the Vedas, the Upanishads, and all describe man as sukshma indriya, the 11th sense there. So the soul uses this body and the indriya, the antakaran, are the means to enjoy worldly pleasures. But that's not the final destination. If we understand the functioning of that chariot, the owner is the master, is separate from the chariot. The driver, the horses, the reins, the path, and everything else. And the owner is the soul. Likewise, the soul is totally different from the body, indriya, antakaran, and all these. And when we go into yoga philosophy, understanding, realization of Prakriti, we'll find that even the sukshma sharira, the subtle body, our subtle body, is made of Prakriti. And everything just dissolves at the time of mukti moksha. It's only the soul which remains in the bliss of Ishvara God. And we need no external organs, nothing to enjoy the bliss of God. It's on we are being driven on the power of the energy of Ishvara God there. So the Sankhya Darshan, the forerunner of the yoga philosophy. And since Sankhya is also mentioned by Sri Krishna in the Bhagwad Gita, that's why I've taken it first. Sankhya is about Tattva Dhyan, knowing all the elements of the universe, which is essential to grow on the path of yoga. And these elements are first Purush, the 11 principles of consciousness, of which Atma is one, Jivatma, and then Paramatma, Param Purush is second. Then we have the third eternal element. So Purush consists of both Ishvara and Jiv. Then we have Prakriti, which is the next eternal matter, primordial matter, and constituting of the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Sattva, brilliance, Rajas, activity, and Tamas, sluggishness. Generally, in short. Then the first admixture produced out of that in the creation is Mahat or Buddhi, which is the principle of intelligence. Then we have the principle of identity, ahankar, not to be confounded with ahankar, ego there. And we have man, the thinking ability, logic. Then we have the 5 senses, organs of perception, jnanendriya. We have the karmendriya, the 5 organs of action. 5 tanmatra, the objects of the senses, touch, smell, form, taste, etc. Then we have the Panch Mahabhut, space, air, fire, water, and earth. And this is the space which is Shunya Akash, which is no particle there, not even air. So if we can also link, that's another aspect of yoga. Space is for sound, air, air is for, fire is for form, water is for taste, the earth is for smell, and air is for touch, is linked to that. So that makes total 25 elements. Sankhya philosophy guides the seeker towards truth, understanding the creation, understanding Prakriti, and ultimately Ishvara Siddhi, that is ईश्वर की सिद्धि बाह्य इंद्रियों, ज्ञानेंद्रिय और कर्मेंद्रियों के साथ नहीं होता है. Since the evolution starts from the subtle to the gross matter, yoga teaches us, and Sankhya leads us to that yoga is the reverse process, taking us from the gross, that is the body, to the subtle, the soul. And Sankhya philosophy mentions yoga. Yoginam bahya pratyakshatyam dosha. Yogis cannot achieve the ultimate goal of yoga, God realization, only with the external tools, the senses of perception and the senses, the organs of actions. Ishvara Siddhi, which I mentioned, it says Ishwar ki asiddhi sirf बाह्य इंद्रियों से नहीं होती. ईश्वर बाह्य इंद्रियों के माध्यम से असिद्ध होता है. By the external organs we cannot realize Ishwar God. Unfortunately, Sankhya, when taught in philosophy, is being taught as a Nastic, that is atheistic philosophy. No. This sutra of Sankhya is wrongly spelt, and this have been legated to us by the foreign rulers in India. Otherwise, if we go to the interpretation of the rishis there, we'll be understanding that this is a totally theistic philosophy. Then the Taittiriya Upanishad, it says, Tvameva pratyaksham brahmasi, tvameva pratyaksham brahma varishyami. Ritam charishyami, satyam charishyami. This goes that the realization of God. Tvameva pratyaksham brahmasi. Tvameva pratyaksham brahma varishyami. You have to understand the knowledge, vivek, wisdom, and then through the man, the subtle organ, realize God. Sankhya philosophy says, Mukta Baddha Yoranyatara Bhavanan Tat Siddhi. Yoga aims at God realization, and this is the aim and objectives. And that is the same with the Gita there. Yoga philosophy gives the practical tool to inquire about our true identity. Hum kaun hai? Who are we? If we are this body, so then why death? Why the body is inert? What is the thing that leaves this body? Or what is the thing which just hit on the stomach and say, I? What guides there? And remember, when somebody say I, it's always hitting towards the, as we say, Hriday Akash, the place where Atma, soul, dwells in the body. Just below the sternum, the empty, the hollow space there. So that's the concept of identity. knowing the real identity, this is where yoga philosophy empowers us. The Yoga Darshan or Yoga Sutras of Patanjali ji is a core text of the philosophy of yoga, and it is considered to be the manual, the topmost manual of meditation. Whatever we see in bits and pieces of the world have been just as breaking one big snowball into several snowballs. But that wholeness of the big snowball has been broken. So that's why Patanjali Maharshi Yoga Darshan remains the core. And we'll understand that when we'll go into the details of the Gita. And the Yoga Darshan, let's see what is yoga. Maharshi Patanjali, the first sutra says, Atha Yoganushasanam. With authority, he's defining the yoga philosophy. And in the Vyas Bhashya, it says this is a Samadhi Shastra to self-realization and God realization. Because self-realization is the first part, the first leg before God realization. And the next sutra says, Yogaschitta Vritti Nirodha. Silencing of the flux of mental activities. And I usually add also emotional activities. Silencing of the mental and emotional activities is yoga. Then we'll be able to realize other things. And there's no difference from the definition we'll see with the Gita. Sankhya and Yoga, both are common philosophy. Know this. There's absolutely no Chinese wall between the two. And if we make a close study of the Gita, when Sri Krishna talks about Sankhya, he's referring to knowledge. And this is the main objective of Sankhya. Sankhya itself, Sankhya, about the numbers of the elements, knowing the elements, then we'll be able to link to make the proper connection. It's just like when we have the computer chips, we know where to plug in which chip, and we know we'll get the thing working. Sankhya Yoga and Sankhya and Yoga philosophy both says the main cause of suffering is the identification or confounding ourselves with what we see in this world. Me, mine, and myself. This is where we lose the proper identity. Ye mera, mera, mera. And there is one, I remember when I was a kid, I was listening to one lecture by one sannyasi. He was saying, the person till he lives, व्यक्ति जब मेरा जीता है तो मैं करता हूँ जैसे बकरा करता है, और बकरा जब मर जाता है तो उसका त्वचा क्या खाल का क्या करते हैं, वो सोनार के पास वो जो क्या बोलते हैं, the thing that the jeweler press with his feet and blow air on the molten gold. That was formerly when the jewelers were doing handcrafts ornaments. तो फिर वहां पे वो खाल जो है तू 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 करता है, हवा फेंकता रहता है. And this is where we are left. And Yoga tells it in clear words. The third sutra says, Tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. हम क्या है, अपने असली स्वरूप को भूल करके जो भी हमारे सामने आते उसमें घुल मिल जाते हैं. We just confound ourselves with what we see in this world, losing our own identity. And this is the dilemma of Arjuna in the midst of the battlefield. We'll come to that. Yoga philosophy says, through the practice of yoga, one attains insight, which is vairagya, very important. And we also attain detachment because we are able to see Jivatma or Jiv as separate from the body. The soul, call it by any other name, consciousness or other thing. This is totally separate from the body. And when we can see that differentiation clearly, distinctly, we'll have the ability to distinguish the ultimate truth, experience that truth, that bliss, and attain that state of infinite peace, bliss, and freedom. This is mukti. Maharishi Patanjali goes on the eightfold process of yoga, Ashtang yoga. And this is a word which, even if we do Google search, we get several interpretations. Some people are running Ashtang yoga schools or studios, but it doesn't start with the basics. And the basics of Ashtang yoga is yama, niyama, then asana, after that pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyan, and samadhi. Yama, social discipline. Niyama, personal discipline. Asana is posture. We'll come into the details after. Pranayam is breath control. Pratyahar is introversion of senses. Dharana is focus. Dhyan is meditation. Samadhi is realization. And the basics are yama and niyama. Whatever we do, we need the sense of discipline as a member, as the smallest unit of society, and we need self-discipline to be able to live a healthy life on the physical level, moral level, mental level, spiritual level. So we be able to create harmony and live in happiness. The next one would be Yoga philosophy says from the Yoga Vasisht by Maharishi Vasisht, Mana prashamana upaya yoga iti abhidhiyate. Yoga is the subtle technique to calm the mind. The important thing in yoga is just taming the monkey mind. I will say monkey mind because we are just jumping from one topic to the other without making the links. And this is what happens in the life of common people. And yoga makes us a seeker, an independent seeker, not dependent 100% on the mind. We'll use the logical application of knowledge, whether it be physical sciences or spiritual sciences, to grow on in life. The Gita, this is the famous shlok where we get the definition of yoga in the Gita. Yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddhi asiddhiyo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. Samatva yoga uchyate. So this last part says the balanced state of mind in both success and failure is yoga. This is the word of Sri Krishna, not mine. Firmly established in yoga, performing all actions in the selfless way, detached way, and keeping the balanced state of mind, whether that will end up in success or failure, irrespective of that, keeping the balance of the mind is yoga. This is where the Gita lends us in the definition of yoga. That's a repetition. Now I'll call on Anjum ji just to make a break with one meditative music. So just sit down straight, close the eye gently, and appreciate the
Sure. Divya, can you play this? Thank you. आचार्य जी आपको अनम्यूट करना पड़ेगा.
Yeah. Uh, okay. Says to me there's a problem with the screen sharing. Just a minute. This. Okay. Let's come. So now we are going to start delving into the Gita. We'll just do an overview today and go into the details during the forthcoming sessions. When we just think about the Gita, usually this is the first picture that goes into our mind. Yet there is another picture which comes before that. This one says Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre, the first few words of the Gita. And it pertains to the physical battle of the Mahabharata in the Kurukshetra. It's the battle for Dharma, for establishing righteous rule. The Kshetra is Kurukshetra, the center of power which was there in that time in India. Kurukshetra was the center of power for Samrat Yudhishthir. Eventually, he was coronated as emperor with local rulers, just as we have now the central government and the local governments. So Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre, but before that, this is the first picture which should come to our mind when we think about the Gita. If we start from here, this shows the wavering mind, the fickle mind of Arjuna. And in that situation where he's veiled by ignorance, which said Tada Drashtu Swarupe Avasthanam from Yoga philosophy, confounding what we see as ourselves. He was saying people on the opposite side of the battlefield as his kin and kin, as relatives, as guru, as things. And there, that was ignorance dominating his mind. And when that veil of ignorance was dominating, he needed knowledge, and that knowledge came to him in the form of the Gita given to him by Sri Krishna as the Sarthi. And he was not only the charioteer of that chariot, at that time he was the spiritual charioteer of Arjun. Through knowledge to make Arjun get the proper assessment, but leave Arjun to be free to do his karma as he deems fit. So when we understand this picture, that when we confound ourselves with what we see in front of us and we fail to go back to our real self, this is what will happen to us in daily life. My approach to these scriptures is the practical applications. Can we see ourselves in such position every day in life, where we are faced with complex situations and we can't, as we say in modern management, step out of the box, take a very independent view and stand and solve the problems. Often problems don't get solved because we confound ourselves with the problems. And this is the reason for rag, inordinate attachment, dvesh, hate, more, inordinate attachment, etc. And when we can't solve that problem, then we go into krodh, anger. So when we think about the Gita and we are trying to live our life as per the teachings of the Gita, let's see if we are not living every single moment of our life as Arjun in the face of problems and can't find the way out of it. And the only way out of it is to get the correct, true knowledge. That's the purpose. And this is the first point in the teaching of the Gita. Blinded by ignorance, we have to overcome that. And this is where what we pray for, and do we really do that? Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya. We always think about Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya in terms of lighting a lamp on the Pavli. No, that's a prayer that we have to realize daily in our lives. Yoga in the Gita, Samavatam Yoga Uchyate, which I mentioned earlier. Balance of the mind equals to yoga. And there's no difference between what Maharshi Patanjali teaches us in terms of yoga chitta vritti nirodha. And eventually we'll start with yama niyama and go onwards, grow on the path, dharana, dhyan, and up to samadhi. We'll take a few glimpses of that. What is the balanced mind? What does that do to us? As we say, dharma kshetre kurukshetre. What is dharma? The balanced mind empowers us to stand for dharma. Not only know what is dharma, but to stand for it. Righteousness in life. We'll be able to differentiate between satya and asatya, truth and what is not true. And I always avoid using the word untruth there, though it's there in the PowerPoint. I would just say what is not true. What is not true, half truth is not true. Because if the other 50% is false, the whole theory collapses. So satya, asatya. Just remember, half truth or part truth is not truth till the other part is not confirmed to be true. Then from that we'll be able to know what is right and what is wrong. Dharma, adharma. We'll be able to get engaged into our duties and responsibilities, kartavya, and shun negligence. Remember the picture of Arjun? He couldn't make the distinction between truth and untruth. He didn't know what was right and what was wrong. And from that, he couldn't know what was his duties and responsibilities. So when he dropped down from the chariot or sat in the chariot asking to Krishna, that was negligence because he didn't have the knowledge. He couldn't assess what was right and what was wrong and what was his duties and responsibilities. We'll be able to make the difference between vidya and avidya, and this is what the Gita stands for. Vidya, knowledge, and to unveil the cloud of avidya, darkness of ignorance. And from there, we'll be able to break the cycle of birth and death, mrityu dukh se chhod karke, hum amrit mukti moksh ki or chalenge. We'll be able to make the shift from the cycles of birth and death unto moksha, mukti. And this is the aims and objectives of when Sri Krishna says, Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. And Maharshi Patanjali, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And remember, everything goes through a learning process in life. And in the Upanishads, the learning was given to us in terms of Shravan, Manan, Nididhyasan, and Sakshatkar. If I take it in the life of the personalities of the Mahabharata, we all know that shloka, Krodham Ma Kuru, free words, given by the sage to Yudhishthira. And everybody in that class stood and say, Guruji, I know the lesson. Krodham Ma Kuru. Yudhishthira said, I don't know. He came second day, third day, fourth day, didn't know. And the fifth day, the Guru took the stick, gave him a beating, and then he said, Guruji, now I know the lesson. Because when he was beaten, he didn't get angry. And Guruji says, free words, you took 5 days? He said, no, I knew the words, but I didn't know the meaning. So we need the learning steps given to us in the Vedic Hindu philosophy of life. Shravan, reading, active listening to acquire knowledge. It's not passive listening. And this is what Arjun does. And after that, he contemplates on the knowledge that is Manan. He puts the question to himself between what is right and what is wrong. Logic, reasoning, the pros and cons, that is the Didyasan. Then at the end, when he's ready to fight the battle, he comes to Sri Krishna and says, I'm ready now to go for the fight. And this is Sakshatkar, realization, asserted knowledge, realized knowledge. And this is in our day-to-day world. And this is also in the world of spiritual sciences. If we look, we had the problem of COVID. Just at the beginning of last year, probably 1 year behind, February last year, that became a pandemic. Scientists started to listen, to read, and to understand the problem. Then they started contemplating on the problem, why, how, when, where, etc. When they understood the problem, then came the phase of vaccine development. Then they went into the process. And when we have the vaccine now today, that is realization of the knowledge. So the ways 5,000 years back, during the time of the Mahabharata, and before that even in the Vedas, and we'll see that even in the Satyuga, after that Treta Yuga in the Ramayana, and we'll see that in the Dwapar, in the Mahabharata and Gita, and we'll see that even today in the Kali Yuga. The process is the same, eternal knowledge given to us. So do we use our logic and apply that in life? Yoga also requires us not to blindly accept knowledge. Even the Gita, when Shri Krishna has given the knowledge, remember, he says to Arjun, you are free to choose to fight or to run away. And if you choose to fight, I'll be with you at the chariot. You just have to do your duty and leave the outcome to time. So we'll go into that, into further details. Now let's look at one point. When we look into Krodhamma Kuru, that was realization of knowledge. That is, we have to contemplate, to put the questions, and to bring everything to realize that knowledge. So it requires regular practice, long, passionate dedication, devotion, and this is what Yudhishthira did. Now look at this picture. We all know that's really a very tricky situation where Arjun was told to shoot the arrow into the eye of a wooden fish revolving up and by looking into the reflection in water. And shows the sharpness of the focus of Arjuna. And when he shot the arrow, that was to the target. That is the focused mind dharma. And when Arjuna was in the midst of the battlefield, he forgot his focus. And even after winning the battle, they all lose the sense in the victory, and Krishna ji again comes with Gita, which what is commonly known as Gita, another discourse to bring them back to the right path. And that's interesting because it shows that if we don't keep up to the practice, we can still go back to square one or back to zero. So this is dharana, the focused mind. So the practice, according to Maharishi Patanjali Yoga Sutra, Sutra 14 of the first part, Sa to dirkala nairantariya satkara sevito dharir bhumi. Whatever we practice in life, needs have been just corrected there. Such practice needs to be over a long time, dirkal, constant, regular, nairantariya, and with total commitment, passion, devotion, satkara, sevita. And one example, look at the Olympics, the 100 and 200 meters race, for which Usain Bolt is famous. He runs the race in less than 10 seconds, the 100 meters, 9 and some fractions. And the 200 meters, I think it's 18 and some fractions seconds. He practices morning, during the day, and afternoon for 4 years to run for less than 10 seconds and less than 20 seconds to win the Olympic medals. So that shows the regular practice over a long period of time with the dedication, the passion, the devotion that he has. And that applies to any field of life if we really want to succeed. Be it day-to-day life, as we say, rearing of children, cooking, meditating, cleaning, or any profession which we can imagine. I always relate it to that. The first time when we start cooking our own meals, be it noodles or be it roti, be it anything, the first time we never get it right. But if we just drop down all the tools and say, this is not my cup of tea, we'll never be able to make another cup of tea. It's that we have to continue to persist. Perseverance is keyword, and practice regularly. Then we'll be able to realize that. To reach the ultimate purpose of yoga, samadhi, where we realize ourselves, we realize Prakriti, we realize God, that takes all the time it takes. And putting into practice yama, niyama in life itself, especially with the concept of Ishwar Pranidhan, the last of the yama. It can take a whole lifetime. But what happens is that if we don't complete the cycle in this lifetime, we shouldn't despair, is that we are laying the foundations, firm foundations, because Gita also speaks about rebirth. We are laying the firm foundations so that we don't start from scratch or from zero in the next life. So that's where it leads to. So this picture also reminds us of our duties and responsibilities, especially in abstruse spiritual sciences. I say abstruse because all the other sciences, chemistry, physics, etc., we can see it in the lab. This one is subtle. It's our own experience. And our duties and responsibilities here is to acquire the proper knowledge, do the manan, that is the contemplation out of it. Nididhyasan, put the questions, the pros and cons to understand the knowledge correctly, and then apply it in daily life. And that would be the effective and efficient application of the knowledge. Let's see this picture. This is a very tricky picture in the sense that both Arjun and Duryodhan go to Sri Krishna to ask for help before the battle starts. That's even before the Gita. I'll take cross references like that in and out because it brings us to point. When somebody has forgotten the inner self, he behaves like Duryodhan. He forgets that when he wakes up early in the morning, the first thing he sees is his feet and not by the side. The maxim comes, Vinash Kale Viparit Buddhi, and this is what happens. Forgets the daily practice that when we wake up, the first thing we see is what is on the side of our feet, not what is by the side of our head. So that's ignorance again. And look at Arjun in whole humility. He surrenders and sits at the feet. And when Krishna opens his eyes, he sees Arjun first. And then he asks Arjun, but Duryodhan say, I came first. And if Arjun could have abused of that position, since Krishna ji say, I saw you first. But then he says, no, Duryodhan came first, let him ask first. So that's taking also the truth, despite that may not be to his favor. But then when Duryodhana asked for the whole army, then Krishna says, what is left for me to give to you, Arjun? Then Krishna, he knows the answer. But Arjun says, I don't need the army. Yourself, you are more than the army. So that's the concept of surrender. And it comes, if I'll join that to Yoga philosophy of Patanjali, that will come under Ishwar Pranidhan. If we want a cleaner world to live in, and link it to day-to-day life. If we want a better quality of air, better quality of life, let's follow the laws of nature. What we say in the Vedic concept is Rit, Ritancha, Satyancha. One is truth, the truth of the situation, but the other one, Rit, is the eternal laws of this universe. If we follow these laws, I think we'll have a better quality of life, both on the material aspect and the spiritual aspect. This is another picture from the Mahabharata. This is post the Gita, which is about to close the war now. When Bhishma Pitamaha falls under the arrows of Arjun, all come around him. In the last, Sri Krishna stands with the 5 Pandavas. And Bhishma Pitamaha starts talking about the good things, how to be good in life, how to be ethical in life, and how to be that. And say whole Bhishma Parva in the Mahabharata. The question comes from Yudhishthir. Tatri, where were you with that knowledge when Draupadi was being disrobed? And Atmanirikshan, self-analysis. Bhishma Pitamaha says, I was living under the rule of Duryodhan. And the food and the environment and everything where I was living had the impact. And this is why I couldn't come through with all the power, all the might, all the knowledge that I have to save the situation. जैसे कहते हैं ना, इन सब के नीचे दबे हुए थे. So whatever be the situation in life, let's not be burdened by, as we say, debt. Let's not be burdened by being indebted to others. Indebted in the sense that where we have to speak the truth, we can't speak the truth. Where we have to take proper actions, we don't take proper actions. Because in the karma philosophy of yoga, which we'll be looking ultimately, we'll understand that karma comes from what we do ourselves, which is krit. Then there's another component which we cause to do by others. And then the third one is karit, that is where we give our consent. And staying silent is consent. So this is one thing which we learn from this one. And I'll come to the last touch on the Gita. Remember the one, these two pictures, if you can do a comparative analysis. The first picture is we seek knowledge as a seeker. And Arjuna is seeking knowledge from Sri Krishna, is seeking guidance. And after analyzing that guidance, moving as per that guidance, the one who gives knowledge becomes the charity of our life. Sri Krishna becomes the charity of Arjuna. These two pictures are what we can realize in our day-to-day life. And if we realize that in our day-to-day life, that is uniting knowledge with actions, that also is yoga. As I said, yoga says yoga, join, unite. And if we look into our own life, birth is yoga. As we say, sanyog, the meeting of the soul with the body. And the contrary is viyog, which is death, the parting of the soul with the body. Then some other concepts which we see, Kriya Yoga is very popular, but Maharshi Patanjali and even Sri Krishna, when refers to Kriya Yoga, is Tapa Swadhyay Ishwar Pranidhana. Tapa, developing resilience, Swadhyay, study of the scriptures, gaining true knowledge, and Ishwar Pranidhan, surrender to the laws of nature, the laws of the creation, and the guidance of the divinity within us, the divine guidance. We see Sanyog. Sanyog is the meeting or union, and Viyog is parting. Ashtang Yoga, I mentioned that the eightfold process starts with the Yama and Niyama. Sankhya Yoga is about knowledge also. When we link ourselves, we join ourselves to true knowledge about Prakriti until where Prakriti helps us in our life. Then Samprayoga, realization through study of the scriptures, which I hope we'll be able to reach to some level of that at the end of these sessions. Then developing competencies, Yogyata, Vyas Bhashya of the Sutra 2.53 of Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Yogyata is one of the words which come. Then another word which comes is Viniyoga, the applications of knowledge. These are some of the words. Tomorrow I'll make an overview of the chapters of yoga. And if you have, there's one book, Srimad Bhagwad Gita by Baba Ramdev. Is given a brief of the different yoga which we see in the various chapters, using yoga as the link of the word link. And even Western scholars have tried to delve into that. So whenever we see the word yoga, let's come to that there will be as many interpretations of the word yoga as there are people in this universe. But let's go back to what Sri Krishna says, the balance of the mind, and what Maharshi Patanjali says, taming of the mental activities. So I will end here for today and leave the floor open to Anjumji for the add-ons, and then we'll move to the question and answer sessions.
Thank you so much. It was a great insight. I hope this is a very good opening of this course, and people must be getting the insight because first question it always arises about the incident happened with Draupadi, and many students here are women. So that was always a question in mind why it happened to her, and the darbar was full of wisdomful people, seniors, family members, and I always say your education, your wisdom becomes nullified if you do not speak for the right, for the truth. That's the learning for all of us. And there are many more examples I don't want to quote from the political backgrounds. But yes, people are wisdomful, they are educated, they are highly qualified, but they are not speaking for the nation at the right time. For the correct causes, they are not supporting. So Gita, from Gita, we have got this answer today that yes, it is a sin when you do not speak when the time requires, when you do not take action for the truth, when you do not support the truth, you will be always considered as a sinful. So thank you so much. Now the question and answer round. Um, you can write in the chat, and if you are comfortable and you don't have much noise, you can open up your mic and ask. So Neetuji, you can shoot your question first.
Yeah, Namaskar Acharya ji. Uh, I would like to know how do we place the sibling rivalry here, which was between the two sides, Pandavas and Kauravas.